Hello, my name is Emma. I am the EUS Vancouver president. Happy to chat with you all. Just going to go through kind of a comparison of what UBC engineering looks like now and maybe what it looked like from 1970. In 1970, there were 9 programs at UBC engineering. Now there are 13. We have added biomedical engineering, computer engineering, environmental, integrated, and manufacturing engineering, and changed the names of metallurgical engineering to materials engineering and from mineral engineering to mining engineering. We also no longer have an agricultural engineering program at UBC, but I'm sure they are sorely missed. In 1970, there were about 1,200 total students in the entire Faculty of Applied Science. In 1970, the largest departments were electrical engineering, chemical engineering, and mechanical engineering, and the first years had a pretty big slice of the pie also. In 1970, there were about 230 Bachelor of Applied Science degrees awarded to UBC engineers, as per my count of grad photos in the 1970 slipstick. So in 2020, we have grown significantly. There are about 5,000 total students in UBC engineering now, and the graduating class last year was 919 students. So almost exactly 400% increase from 1970, 50 years ago. The largest departments now are civil engineering, still electrical engineering, and mechanical engineering. And the proportion of first-year engineers that we have is relatively unchanged. They're still about 20% of our overall student body. We have largely restructured the EUS since 1970 as well. The 1970 kind of EUS executive consisted of a president, first and second vice presidents, secretary, treasurer, public relations officer, social and sports coordinators, and a publicity representative. And then council consisted of the 9 department club presidents and 11 ex officio members, like the slipstick rep or the red sales rep would go to EUS council and kind of run the show. Looks a little different these days. So instead of various coordinators and everything, we now have a president and 6 vice presidents, academic, administration, communications, finance, spirit, and student life. You have probably seen Christian Kyle in the chat. He is our VP Spirit this year, and he is in charge of ensuring that engineering tradition is alive and well, and runs a lot of our traditional events and spirited, obviously, events to help out UBC engineering students. Our council these days looks like 7 executives and 13 department club presidents, so that has shifted a little bit. We also have a student senator for the Faculty of Applied Science that sits on our council, an AMS representative who is not me. We have 2 now that go to AMS council, and 7 ex officio representatives. So those are the kind of presidents or coordinators of different clubs that are affiliated with the EUS, things like Engineers Without Borders, Engineers for a Sustainable World. We kind of have clubs that the EUS works with and supports, and they come to our council and kind of give us different viewpoints about different communities within UBC engineering.
Yeah, well, in the day, this is what we needed to get into the library. It's a key punch card. Most of us got to UBC by traveling from the outskirts. I lived in Burnaby. Students came from Surrey, from all over the Lower Mainland there. Most people that stayed on campus came from outside the Lower Mainland. This is my C-Lot sticker off the first car I ever owned. I still have it. My son's hot rodding it. It was 1930 Model A, but the C-Lot, we believe, was somewhere just east of the existing engineering complex. So we used to travel out there and try and get there as early as possible so we get a parking spot as close to the front. And this is where we congregated to see if we could join the 40 Beer Club. This was Fraser Arms Hotel on at the very end of Granville Street in South Fraser. And this is where we went to drink. In those days, there was no pit, there was no pub, there was no student union building. And this is a coaster that Bill Spilchin saved for us. The predecessor to the Volkswagen Bug was called we called it the ASS, which is affectionately known as the ASS. It was actually an acronym for Austin Super Sport. But it was very rare to see a rear shot of the Austin Super Sport because everybody was always pushing it. It never ran very well. And in the day, it kept getting demolished by science, the Aggies, whoever. So a new ASS had to be resurrected. Eventually, they became collector's items and we couldn't afford to buy them anymore. Bill Richardson came up with a picture of I had a really hard time finding a picture of the back to show the acronym, but this one was being towed by a homecoming parade, so we got lucky. As you can see, there's a tow bar on it. Some of you have heard of President Dean Gage. He was renowned for helping students out financially, and part of our day has been reminiscing about Dean Gage. He was the most amazing math teacher you could ever have, and he was renowned for helping people out monetarily that were in dire straits and having a tough time getting through. On top of his generosity, he was also very kind and supportive. And this is a letter I cherish from him today. He was the type of person that whatever you did for him, he always sent you a thank you note. Every year in the spring, near the end of the school year, Dean Gage would host a dinner at the faculty club. And it was just an amazing dinner, like I said, 4 or 5 course dinner. And he'd invite us in there. And at the end of the dinner, we'd have aperitifs and that sort of thing. And he'd bring out cigars. So at the end of that dinner, he would also bring out books that he signed as a memento from our visit with him. When you hear of Dean Gage or we speak of Dean Gage, it's with a lot of reverence. In our day, and when I graduated, we thought the stunt of all stunts was the 9 o'clock cannon stunt. One night it disappeared around, I was actually engineering week. And it was quite a famous stunt because it captured the whole of Vancouver. It was on the news, it hit the radio stations. And there was a very famous cartoonist in the Vancouver Sun by the name of Norris. And when Norris produced a cartoon, it was always kind of a spoof on something. And we got special permission from him to put this in the slipstick. So I believe this is the only Norris cartoon ever produced of the engineers out at UBC. As Lynn alluded to, we always tried to do something that didn't harm people. We didn't really steal a 9 o'clock gun. We found it. We held it up for ransom and raised a bit of money for I believe it was the Easter Seal Fund. After I graduated, I used to go out to UBC to recruit co-op students. And every time I was out there, I noticed how prominent the literature was with engineering cairn. It seemed like the engineering cairn, to me, had become an actual logo for and a symbol of engineering out at UBC. What I used to think was the most famous stunt of our day was 9 o'clock gun. I realized today that UBC students at Vancouver campus have inherited an absolute mess with the engineering cairn, but it's become the absolute symbol. And I think the engineering cairn today is probably the most famous stunt of all. And I'm really grateful to Lynn for coming to present that perspective, because it was important to me that you understood our demographics, where we came from. And I'm kind of here to apologize for the mess we've left you, but I'm here also to congratulate you for keeping up the spirit. You're doing one heck of a job. And here's a few pictures of the teacup game. This was a game between, I think it was the home wreckers and the nurses. And we kind of went out to support both of them, but it was part and parcel of the chariot race. I think the chariot race was at the intermission. And as Lynn alluded to, the chariot race was a brutal exercise. And to this day, I can still smell the aroma coming out of there. And luckily, I was on the end of a camera taking pictures like Eric. So I never got to participate. And here's an example, our engineers ball in the day. This is 1970. I was a US coordinator in spring of 1969. The previous social coordinator said to me, now you better go right away and reserve the Showmark building, because if you don't, we might lose it. This kind of gives a picture of how massive the ball was. The Showmark building was parceled off with a certain area, and each discipline we'd have a theme, and each discipline would have to decorate it. And this gives you an idea of how big our engineers ball was. Not only did students attend, but professors, and they came to vote on the ball model. This man in the middle, that's Dean Gage. If anybody couldn't afford to go to the engineers ball, go see Dean Gage and he would help us out. There was a fee because we had to cover costs, but it was quite a spectacle. It was a fun time for all.
Thanks, Bill. Emma, you've got some more slides to share with us about what's happening on campus today.
Yeah, the most obvious thing that has changed on campus is the buildings and facilities that we have access to as UBC engineers now. When I was going through the slipstick in 1970, putting together content for this presentation, I came across the slipstick letter from the head of metallurgical engineering at the time, saying how pleased and proud they were of the new brand spanking new Frank Forward Metallurgy building. The Frank Forward building is now unstable and is considered one of the higher seismic risk facilities on campus. And it has served many generations of UBC engineers well, but it is scheduled to be demolished within the next couple of years and be replaced with a brand new Applied One building. I thought that was a fun fact. Another very obvious change that has happened since 1970 was the demolition of the Cheeze and the installation of the new Engineering Student Center. The Cheeze was built in 1918 as a literal cheese factory to provide employment for soldiers. After the soldiers all kind of went home, it was turned over to the university, and the Aggies moved in, using it for lab space, research activities, and general usage. The engineers thought that they should be privy to that space also, and so moved into parts of the Cheeze at various times. 1980s, around 1982, kind of took full ownership of the Cheeze after years of feuding. It became our home of the EUS and of UBC Engineering for many years after that. In 2013, however, the Cheeze was demolished as it was subject to many health code violations, and the rising UBC engineering student population was just getting too large for the relatively small space of the building, so provided a fairly strong incentive to UBC to provide a new home for the EUS, which we saw in the Engineering Student Center, which I am in right now, which is a 10,000 square foot LEED Gold certified building on the same site as the Cheeze originally stood, is now the home of new EUS activities, space for volunteer operations. We hold many events, and hopefully sometime in the near future we'll be able to welcome you all here for an Old Red New Red in the future. Some photos here of the old cheese factory, the top left photo there, in the early days of the Cheeze, an old black and white photo when it was known as the Dairy Building. Below that, you can see a photo of the Cheeze in the 1980s with a group of engineers gathered out front in the shape of an E. The bottom of the photo is a little cut off, but they're in the shape of an E. And then flash forward to the future in 2013, a photo of the Cheeze just after the governance agreement for the ESC was signed. In this photo, you can see our tanking pond, in which we would ceremoniously throw people into, if they had committed any kinds of tankable offense, which could range from it being midterm season to having a birthday in plus or minus 6 months, or really kind of anything that could be construed as a tankable offense. But yes, CK breathing is a tankable offense. We were unable to install a new tanking pond at the ESC. We do have a kiddie pool for tankings, but we still conduct tankings in other bodies of water throughout campus. The left photo of Demolition Day in 2013 of the old Cheeze. Some of the old wood from the Cheeze is now part of the stair treads. We took some of the wood from the Cheeze and used it as the stair treads in the ESC. So we still have a little piece of our history in our brand new building. And the bottom photo there is of the ESC in 2015. We also have carried on a number of traditions throughout our time as the EUS. The first of which is caroling. So every year on the last day of the fall term, we gather all of the UBC engineers that we can, give them all a good dose of Christmas cheer in the form of eggnog or hot apple drink, and go out Christmas caroling around campus. We go through first year residences to get them woken up for their first day of class. We go through our friends at forestry in the forestry building, and any other classes along the way that we think could use a little bit of Christmas cheer, and distribute kind of thank you notes, Christmas cards, and Christmas gifts along the way. We're also joined by our Godiva band to play Christmas carols as loud as humanly possible, and they made the mistake of giving me the cymbals in my first year, so it's lots of fun. Another tradition that we're very honored to hang on to is EWeek. So here we can see the opening ceremonies of EWeek, which traditionally begin with a boat race competition between all of the departments. We go through a good amount of beverages at the boat race ceremony, and it's a great opportunity for all the departments to kind of show their spirit, cheer very loudly, and kick off a night of festivities. Also during EWeek, we still do a form of chariot racing. I believe it has changed significantly since 1970. These days, every department will build a chariot, and we will book a main mall right around the cairn. And 5 people from a department will have to race their chariot in a time trial format through an obstacle course, essentially down Main Mall. There are 4 legs of the course, and at each kind of stop, the team members on the chariot need to complete a challenge, and between stops, the person in the chariot needs to consume a beverage. Another event that we have every year is Pit Purge, where we will kind of swarm the campus bar, the pit, and we have a number of competitions at the pit also, such as quarter levers, where you have to place a quarter on the floor as far away from yourself as possible behind a line without touching the ground. My favorite event in EWeek is Old Red, New Red. In Old Red, New Red, we gather alumni and current students in the ESC and are able to kind of share stories about what UBC engineering looks like these days, what people have been up to since they graduated. It's a great opportunity to meet people you've never met before and reconnect with people you maybe haven't seen since they graduated. Old Red, New Red is also Old New Red is also the current home of the ball models. So every year, each department will make a ball model. We still invite the dean to come and judge them all, although we have significantly more departments now, so that gets a little bit more difficult every year. And we have a great time sharing stories, showcasing our departments, and celebrating UBC engineering. We have reduced some old traditions or slightly altered them in certain ways, but we are also expanding our traditions and trying to figure out how to keep cornerstone events and traditional events relevant to changing times. But our biggest new tradition is the Iron Pin ceremony, which was established in 2014. In the Iron Pin ceremony, we gather all of the first-year engineering students at the end of their first semester. And for the first years who are on this call, we are trying very hard to figure out what this is going to look like for you this year. But usually we gather all of the first years in the Chan Center, and they learn about their ethical and professional obligations as an engineering student and are introduced to their kind of professional obligations as an engineer once they graduate. So we invite representatives from EGBC, or Engineers and Geoscientists, British Columbia. We invite the deans and other industry professionals to help us lead this ceremony with all kind of UBC engineering students in their first year. So there you can see the pin from 2015 and the UBC Engineering Code of Ethics. The UBC Engineering Code of Ethics is based off of the EGBC Code of Ethics, which is on the reverse of the card. So students have kind of a reminder of their obligation as an entrant into the profession of engineering. And this ceremony has been kind of shared with other universities across Canada, although it started at UBC in 2014. I believe UBCO also runs a version of the Iron Pin ceremony now, and it's been spreading to schools all across Canada as kind of the other half of the Iron Ring ceremony. So students now receive an Iron Pin at the beginning of their degree, and at the end of the degree receive their Iron Ring with all of those associated ceremonies. We also still have a number of patches on our reds. Here you can see some of the patches that we give to our volunteers. The chief patch is traditionally given to the EUS president. E squared, and E cubed patches are given to EUS executives. So on your first EUS executive term, you get an E, and for every subsequent one, you increase in exponents, although 3 is the upper limit of how many executive terms in a row people tend to do these days. The patches at the bottom, the X, M, and D, are kind of different levels of EUS volunteering pins or patches. So X is a representative position, and they are kind of the base level volunteers that are the backbone of all of our events, usually first years. So people will get X patches for painting the cairn, for bartending at our event, helping keep the ESC in one shape, all of that good stuff. The manager and director patches are given to people who kind of run an integral operation of the EUS. So we give a director patch to our EWeek directors or to our Weeky Not directors, recognize them for the increased level of time and commitment to the EUS. And the P patch there is our first year council patch. So students who serve on first year council for the year get the P patch to commemorate their experiences there. We also have some specific volunteering patches. So we have a patch for the eatery, which is the small cafe that we run out of the Engineering Student Center. We have a beer patch that goes to our inventory manager because they buy and transport all of our beer for us. The dollar sign there is for our red sales representatives, so the people who help distribute reds and patches and pins and all of the other kind of EUS merchandise that we sell. And the last 3 patches there, the Godiva playing the French horn, the trumpet, and the music note are all associated with the Godiva band. So the square goes to members of the band, and the trumpet and music note you receive by attending Godiva band events like caroling. We also give out patches for sports. There are 4 patches, but 2 of them look pretty similar in photos. There's a small and a large red E, and then a yellow E and a white E. As you go to more sports events, win more sports games, participate in more kind of recreation events on campus throughout your degree, you get more sports points and get more patches. Celebrate that. There are some other achievements also that we honor with patches in the EUS. The Golden A is highly sought after and is granted to people who have received 100% in a class or won the Genius Bowl, which is the EUS trivia competition. The charity patches there are recognize people who have committed significant time and effort to charitable causes. So whether that's blood donation, raising money for Movember or the BC Children's Hospital, there are different amounts of involvement in charity endeavors that earn you those charity patches. The Chariot Racer patch is given out to the teams who win the chariot race event at EWeek.
Thank you, Emma, for that. The Okanagan is doing a few things, Sam. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, for sure. So UBC Okanagan, we have a whole bunch of stuff going on, things this year. Like Emma mentioned, we have iron pin ourselves. So I've got mine on my jacket here. It's quite a different design, but we've done it as well. One of the things that we have here is, it's not quite a cairn, but we call it our E. It's outside of our engineering management and education building. We don't have our own engineering building, but we make do with what we have. So we have our lovely E out there. It's usually painted red, but it gets vandalized quite often. I know other faculties have painted it orange, and we paint it white every year for our 14 Not Forgotten event. I know our frat SPD on campus helps out with painting it every year, and so that's what's going on in this photo here, is painting it white for that, and that's one of our really important events every year. And then this is, we painted it for EWeek one year. We had EWeek and we had our competition between each of our different disciplines. We split everyone up into basically the different Hogwarts houses, and then every team competed as a Hogwarts house based on what their discipline was to win points for the thing. So we painted it in each of the 4 colors of the Hogwarts house, with red being the largest, obviously, because as it should be. It's also very challenging painting it in the snow. We've got to clear everything off first. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, and so this is a photo of, in my first year, we went to a conference in, it was hosted by the University of Victoria near Vancouver. And at that conference, one of the big things in engineering we do now is at conferences there, pretty much every school has a mascot, and mascot stealing is a really big thing that goes on. This is a photo of the mascot from the University of Saskatchewan Road Bear that we stole and put on the E for display when we got back. We stole a total of 5 mascots at that conference. So we went pretty hard. It was a little ridiculous. Yeah, so we've got a lot of stuff that goes on over here. Certainly a lot of things are different this year as we're adapting to the online format and figuring things out. But certainly a lot of our traditions are quite derived from the Vancouver campus, even though we've put a lot of our own twist on them.